I actually think we all worked for Lillian.
Yeah, really? Thank you, Pat.
I work for Lillian too. And I want to hear some questions you have, but there are a couple of three incidents that I want to tell you a little bit about her. Actually, she did some work for me before I came here. As the city manager of Mesquite, we didn't have a librarian. We wanted to build a library, and we didn't have a librarian. We just had an idea, that's about all. And we hired George Dahl, who, a well-known architect here in town, who'd done a lot of libraries, including this, I think the last central library. And we hired him, and every time I'd go see him, and I'd have a question about libraries, he'd get Lillian on the phone, on the speakerphone. She didn't know that I was there, and probably to this day, if she were alive, would know that I was there. So she went to work and helping me way back then in building that first library, and she was very kind. She was viewed as the authority, as an expert in libraries. Now, I next saw her at the Goals for Dallas conference in Salado. How many of you know there is a Goals for Dallas? There was one. It was highlighted at the conference at Salado, and I was fortunate enough to be one of three outside of Dallas invited. I still don't know why, but she was there, of course. And if you look at the Goals for Dallas, I still have copies. You see the fingerprints of Lillian on the Goals for Dallas. And so I'll allude to that a little bit. But I got acquainted with her there a little bit, as much as you can in a conference like that. But then I had no real connection with her until I was offered a job as assistant manager in 1966 and came here as assistant city manager. Now, Lillian was married to a retired fire service officer, and he and Brad had no children, but they had a niece, and they spoiled her something awful. Unfortunately, as niece's activities became more personal and she became more wrapped up in them. She saw less and less of them, and that's probably unfortunate for her and for everybody. It was a disappointment to them. When she and Brad were out to a civic activity, she was the typical spouse and a typical partner of Brad. When there was anything to do with libraries, boy, she was in charge.
For sure.
She, for us managers, she is distinguished in a way that I'll call to your attention. She was an expert at positioning herself. Now that's my term, and maybe it may not have any sense for you, but she positioned herself as an official of the city of Dallas. And she had a specific responsibility, the libraries, but her picture was the whole city of Dallas. And because of that, I used her frequently. For example, I appointed her head of the task force, the city manager's task force on women and their opportunities in the organization. I was interested in diversifying the organization, and it's the first thing I did when I became manager was order if I ever ordered anybody. I always got out of the way. But I asked her to chair that task force to see what the obstacles were to opportunity for women. And she did it in a usually systematic, thoughtful way and produced results that we used. So I had a great deal of confidence in her. Now, she took goals for Dallas for granted, and she took it to her heart. And so, you know, if you read that, and I got it out and looked at it again, it said that the public library, well, first, we're gonna have a great public library, we need, and the public library, and it saw it as a library, all of the libraries are the libraries serving this community. The college and university and schools and industrial, but the city of public library was the core of library service in this community and any other. And she took that to heart, and the goal was to reach out make every citizen in Dallas for library service opportunity that was met their need. So we built grad libraries, one right after the other. And I think she once said that we built twice as many than anybody had ever built before the two of us. Because I know she kept coming in and with another site. And sometime we'll figure out how many of those we built. But she built the community branch libraries, and she expanded that system enormously. And then in the goals program, it said you need a new central library. It's her fingerprint if there was. And she worked for years to get a new central, this building here, a new central library. And another thing that she employed every resource in the world that was at her disposal. And she knew that Mayor Eric Johnson was fond of libraries, goes all the way back to his boyhood days. And he also had great respect for Lillian. And so he was constantly pressing me to put money in the capital program for a new central library. And finally he came down and he said, look, Lil needs a new central library. And he said, I'll be glad to raise some donor money, and I might put a nickel on the drum myself. Well, here we are in the library. This was planned, designed, under construction, Lillian's library. And she cultivated that for years and years, and finally got it done. She provided, my view of her, she provided leadership all the time. It didn't make it, if she was chairman, she was chair, she was given leadership, but if she were just a member of the committee, she was given leadership. Becoming, very becomingly. She did it subtly sometimes, but she also provided leadership to your professional association. And while she was doing that, there was, what do you know, a President's White House conference on libraries. And there she was again, And so she complimented me then by asking me to do provide an address, and then wrote the speech for me. Now, she never ever gave up. That would take a little longer of this than I thought it would. She never ever gave up. When Bob Folsom was mayor, he took on a bunch of projects, an awful lot. Mr. Johnson was provided the dreams for this city. Bob Folsom got them done. And there was a fellow here in town, Jack Struve, that knew that to two co-executives at the Michigan General Corporation had a copy of the Declaration of Independence. One of the best ones anywhere. It's the best condition. It was the only one west of the Mississippi, and they were tired of holding it, and they were wanting to sell it. And Bob would say, "What are we going to do with that guy? I guess I'm going to have to go raise the money for that Declaration. What do we do with it?" And I said, "Well, you know, that's the dream of this country. What city in the United States has a Declaration of Independence in their lobby? We could have it in the lobby here, and maybe that would move people who govern here to do better, and maybe it would give people to have higher expectations." And he said, "Okay," so we raised the money. He gave some himself. He got one of the guys selling it to give back $50,000 toward it. He was a pretty good salesperson, and we bought it, and we put it in the lobby, and we had an alarm around it, and we had all of the hydrogen or whatever to preserve it and all that. And I didn't give it another thought. I ran into Lillian, and she said, "You know, that should be in the library." I said, no, Lillian, now, look, this is why we bought it, and it's supposed to be, the people of Dallas own it, we want it in the city hall. Well, I couldn't get I wanted to get it for the library, I couldn't get any money together to do it. I came back up here one day and it was gone. We go up in the 7th floor, there's the Declaration of Independence that I bought, that I was required to buy for the city hall. And she never gives up. So, well, she was respected by everybody. She was respected. I certainly respected her. She was respected by all of her curly colleagues on the city staff, and they enjoyed her. They respect the community, respected her. As a matter of fact, probably one of the greatest compliments she ever had was that the Hobbinsel Foundation put her on their board. Carl Hobbinsel was a movie producer, one of the great neat, I don't know whether it was 20th Century Fox or what, but one of the great ones that was part of the founding of Republic Bank. He put it in a state, the Hobbinsel Foundation, one of the largest and one of the most respected, and they put her on its board. So she had that kind of respect in the community. Well, I used, you know, I always, I sort of widely professed that I worked for Lillian all over. And toward the end of her life, I went out to see her in the little home that she was being cared for, and to see her and visit with her. And I went in, and she didn't say hello or nothing. Looked at her, and I talked to her a little bit. She said, "Go get me some water." So I went and got her some water and brought it back. "Now go get me some food." I went back and got her some food, and she said, "I want some more water." We ran that. I worked for her. So with that, if you have some questions, if you think I know something about Lily and what it was a privilege for me to know her and to work with her, and all the people, Dick Waters, Andre, all you folks here, it was a great privilege for me. Thank you very much for the compliment to be here.
George, you answered most of my questions. A question about leadership, we got that. I know who's the leader. And I know who was the advocate for libraries because that was Lillian, right? She was a politician, wasn't she?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, was she ever. But, she was slick about it.
Yes, yes. We could study her for many reasons, right? I'm opening it up. What do you, for people to share their memories or their ideas or ask questions of
Well,
George?
I came to Dallas in 1966 out of graduate school. George had just been named assistant city manager, and Lillian was director. I met Lillian initially at the midwinter meeting of the ALA, which used to always be at the Edgewater Beach Hotel. And they had a vacancy to be head of the science and industry department. And David Hennington was the assistant director. And so David squared me around and introduced me to Lillian, and we could not help but take an immediate liking to her and appreciate the confidence that she exuded in every respect. So I had the pleasure and privilege of working with her and for her for about 17 years. I stayed a couple of years after she retired. But the dream of this building was indeed hers. And just one thing to say about that, we convened a group of people. Was the assistant librarian of Congress, and a good friend of mine, Larry Bone, who was at the Memphis Public Library, and a couple of other three people. We had a 2 or 3 day conference with Don Jarvis and his firm, Jarvis, Cuddy Jarvis. And out of that, John Lorenzo, the assistant librarian of Congress, said, well, let's make, what we do is to make a case for change. And so a publication came out of that called The Case for Change, and that led to getting the library on the ballot. It took us 3 elections to get the $25 million worth of public money. With Eric Johnson and George's assistant, we raised $13 million of private money to build what was then and now is the second largest central library under one roof in the United States. One other thing that has not been said that I think if Lillian were here, what she would say is she's most proud of is the fact that she was a staunch defender of freedom to read and the right to read, and she booked no censorship of materials, and she got into some real hot water on more than one occasion, defending all of our right to read what we wanted to. So that was a real credit. She was president of the Freedom to Read Foundation, as well as president of the American Library Association. Great woman, great librarian, great humanitarian, and privileged to know her and work for her, and with this man who, in my judgment, best city manager the city of Dallas has ever had.
You mentioned that she was the first female director of a major library. She was appointed to the job, and she was told by one of my predecessors that now you're in a department head, but you don't need to come to the department head meetings. And prior to my getting there and having department head meetings, the only time we ever had a meeting was to raise money for the United Way. And I don't think she missed any, but she was offended by it, rightly so. And she said, shall I come to the meeting? And I said, of course you come to the meeting. And so her claim is that, my claim to fame with her is I let her go to the department.
I've read that when she was hired in 1961, 62, that she was hired for $1,500 less than a predecessor who was a male. And, I'm just saying, I hope.
Not that much.
Yeah, but that was before your time, because that was 10 years before you became city manager. And she retired, she was 79 years old, right? So, she had a very long tenure.
What did she do with the Republican National Convention when it came to Dallas? Was she a representative of the city of Dallas at that convention?
Yes.
I thought she was chair.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
I think she was chair.
So it's
She
changed.
chaired the local
Arrangements.
committee, she took a leave of absence
No,
from the
she
library
wouldn't have
during that period. And then came back to the library, and then, was then city manager, Chuck Anderson, or who was city manager, had another, appointment for her, so she went to that, and then did not come back to the library after that, retired from that temporary position. But whenever there was a need for a top flight manager, why, that's usually who they call it.
Well, I also read that she, believed everything started with people. And she really went to great lengths to, make sure that people mattered to her. And I'm just wondering, for those of you who worked with her, what was she like as a director in terms of how she treated people and made people feel?
Well, she lets you do your own thing.
Yeah, I think I
She
did.
didn't micromanage, not for 1 second. If you could produce, that was fine. If you couldn't, that was not fine.
You're wrong. She had a gift for surrounding herself with very, very strong people that could do their job. I mean, people like Mr. Waters and people like Wyman Jones and David. And I had actually worked for Houston for 2 years before I came to Dallas. And so I was acquainted with Mr. Hennington and all that. But she had a real gift of surrounding herself with people, like Dick says, that really knew their job, and they were able to carry out what her program, her agenda, shall we say.
Well, she was very patron, she was a patron advocate, and so she described in the writing that, when the patron came in, there was the opportunity. Every patron was an opportunity to make a difference. And I'm really pleased, as I look through the literature, that so many of her speeches are still available in her writing. She was quite a writer. She was very literate. She used, not all librarians are book people, or book women, or book men, but I think she was that. And she used literature and used the spoken word and our cultural references. She embraced those and used them very effectively.
I'd like to tell an anecdote. Of course, she was president when the American Library Association came for the first time to Dallas. And I got roped in with people like Jerry into local arrangements. And that was a real trip to see her hand in things. And one of the stories that we've enjoyed so much about putting Dallas on the map for the American Library Association, which is a very East Coast, West Coast kind of place.
Exactly.
There were folks that asked the local arrangements committee, now can we go over to Old Mexico for dinner?